Tzaharaim Tovim, good afternoon. This week we're discussing Parshat VaYeitzei, and I've entitled this The Strength in Confronting the Dark Spaces in Our Lives. And I'm continuing to use Aviva Zorenberg as one of my mainstays in terms of framing the commentaries that I choose. So just putting that out there. Little psychology, little literary analysis, a lot of different dynamics. So here we go. Going out, coming in, hiding, transitions, coming to terms with the reality of the world as it is, and reconciling that world with one's sheltered and comfortable past, either revealed, either real or perceived, while rising to the challenges that the unknown and incredible future brings. This parsha reflects so many dynamics that are just part of the journey that we call life, as we go through the various ongoing episodes that define Yaakov's story. These events will collectively move Yaakov toward his destiny, the path ordained for him by God. But first, Yaakov must deal with the reality of going or coming out. Out of Beersheba, which was somewhat productive and idyllic in its own right, towards Haran, which Bereshit Rabbah teaches is a reference to a descent into the challenges of a more difficult life and formidable experiences in general. Akin to the Am Yisrael in exile, or by extension to us in our own life journeys. Yaakov is leaving the protective corner of his past, due in no small part to the threat of harm from his brother and family discord that had been exacerbated to forge his own way in the world. Then, at the end of our parsha, for better or for worse, he will leave yet another place that has become his new familiar reality with its own drawbacks, that of Lavan's household, with his family and many years of experiences to process. This is, to be sure, overwhelming and exhausting. Nonetheless, this is the reality of life for all of us in one way or another. It will be in Haran, in the context of the challenges that it presents, that Yaakov will truly be revealed in terms of his authentic self, to him and to others. It is through these experiences that he will take his place in history, and that people who will succeed him, the Bnei Yisrael, will come to be. The Lubavitcher Rebbe teaches about this moment in time as follows. Only as an actualized and physical being, invested within a physical body and inhabiting a physical environment, can one fulfill the total purpose of one's creation, which is to build a mishkan, a dwelling for God in the physical world. In other words, it is not in a protective bubble or by staying in an environment that is familiar to us, that ties us to our past identity, that defines us fully, but rather where all that we bring from those environments become part of our core beings, and we are tested so that we actualize our true and complete selves with agency to act, responding to the challenges at hand, holding on to those values and foundational principles that guide us generationally, and hopefully doing all of it with the guidance of Hashem. We must all leave the homes of our youth to find our adult selves, and this happens on so many different levels. Our children know that this is true. We know that this is true. Our parents or grandparents or whoever had to flee lands of oppression certainly knew that this was true. Coming to this realization, to leave what one knows, good, bad, and indifferent, to go to something unknown, is never easy. In chapter 28, verses 20 through 21, Yaakov verbalizes this dilemma by beseeching God to take care of his needs and ultimately return him to his father's house and land as a fully actualized person. He specifically asks for God's protection, and in return, Yaakov will vow that God will have a visible dwelling for all to see. We read in these verses, Vayidar Yaakov neder. Yaakov made a vow, saying, Im yiyeh Elohim imadi, if God will be with me, ushmareni b'derech hazeh asher anochi holech, and guide me on the way I will go, v'natan li lechem lechol beged lavash, and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, v'shavti b'shalom al beit abi, and I return in peace to the house of my father, v'hayah Hashem li lelokim. God will be for me, my Lord. V'ha'even hazot, and this stone that I will put up, matzeva, as a pillar, as a reminder, Yeh Beit Elokim, will be God's house. V'chol asher titen li asher ashreni lecha. And all that you give me, I will surely give my maser, my tenth, back to you, God. Ramban explains that this was actually a request, ignoring the words yidar and neder, in a sense. Not so much a vow, as the language indicates. Namely, that if God guards Yaakov safely, then Yaakov will be able to observe God's commandments and plans for him, as well as those to follow, and set up an indication of the keeping of this promise. Others, however, including the VaYeitzei, say, no. They are troubled by the notion of this request, meaning that Yaakov's following God is in this statement seen by them as being conditional. If you do X and Y for me, then I will do Z for you. And this, says the VaYeitzei and others, including Rashi, in some hinted form, is not a seemly option for one of our most honored patriarchs. We note that angels are present to guide and protect Yaakov in each of the major pivotal moments of changing place and forging destiny, this time as he is transitioning from his past to his adult future, and the second time again when he moves on and continues to go on his way, taking leave of Laban's world. In chapter 28, verses 12 through 14, we read, Yaakov dreamed a dream, and there was a ladder, and the top reached to the heavens, v'hinei malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo. And the angels of God were going up and down the ladder. And behold, v'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, and God stands beside him and says, Anochi Hashem Elokei Avraham Avicha ve'Elokei Yitzchak ha'aretz asher atan shochev aleha lecha tenana lezarcha. I am the Lord of Abraham your father and Yitzchak, and this land on which you lie, this will be given to you and to your seed. V'haya zarecha ka'afar aretz, and it is on this land that the people that will come after you will be like the dust of the earth and will spread to the west, to the east. Yama kama the kadma v'tzafona v'negba v'nivracha b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama v'zarecha. And all of the families of the earth will be blessed by your presence. What do we learn from the presence of the Malachei Elokim, the angels here, and later in chapter 32, when Yaakov goes on one of his transitions, and we read, Yaakov halach ledarko v'yifku b'malachei Elokim. He goes on his way, and again, the angels of God meet him. Often, we may feel very alone in the most important transitions in our lives. Everyone here has had this experience with our children and our loved ones. How do we get through these events? Who are our guardian angels, so to speak? Are they our own spirits? Are they the spirits of those over whom we are distressed? And all of these are options in the various commentaries regarding who these malachim are when Yaakov is going up and down the ladder. Are they the presence of those that we have lost? Is it God or some other guiding force? To be sure, there are many commentaries available to consider as to the identity of the angels. Are they representative of his battles with others in his dream, or his core identity, or directly connecting him to God who is protecting him? Maybe all of the above? Though, as Nechama Leibowitz uses the analysis of the German biblical commentator Benno Jacob to indicate that this is a dream in which God is speaking directly to Yaakov without intermediaries. So that the identity of these Malachei Elohim, these angels of God, does not require us to use so many interpretive lenses. It's just the means by which God communicates. In using this work, a much larger point is made, in line with Professor Christoph Levin, who I've referred to several times, when we look at these individual stories and look at them as paradigmatic of the much larger context in which the stories are read as foundational. Personal dynamics representing national traumas or experiences or challenges. Nonetheless, we're going to look at this in terms of how it refers to darkness in a larger scale. Remember that this dream and the ladder and all of this happens in darkness, physical darkness, not just individual darkness or darkness of spirit. We talk about this all the time in looking at our texts. Bamidbar, the very name of the fourth of the Chamesh Chomshei Torah, of the 5 books of Moshe, which means in the desert, based on the first word, called numbers in the general non-Jewish world. We look at that as what kind of desert was it? Was it a physical desert? Was it a spiritual desert? Was it an individual desert? Was it a collective desert? And the answer is, as you go through the book, all of the above. That we all find ourselves in these deserts, in these wanton places, in spaces where there's no directions and there's no indication of where we should go, and we have to figure it out. According to the Midrash, Yaakov's dream depicts the rise and fall of nations and their cultures on the arena of world history. What does this have to do with Yaakov's situation, his flight to Padan Aram from the wrath of his brother, his mission to choose a wife and carry on the seed of Abraham and Yitzchak? In answer, it may be said that the Midrash regards the dream not as referring merely to Yaakov, the individual, but Yaakov as the symbol of Israel. Remember, his name will be changed to Yisrael, the embodiment of the wanderings of the Jewish people as it is exiled from one country to another and witnessing the rise and fall of many, many mighty kingdoms. Mitzrayim, Ashur, Syria, Babel, Babylonia, Persia, Greece. The author of the Midrash, who lived during the period of the Roman Empire, had not yet witnessed its decline and fall, and therefore it's not included in the Midrash. When we think of dark times in terms of our larger context, all of the dynamics indicated here become amplified. National confusion, global panic during a pandemic, which we have and are still experiencing, concern about threats to safety and well-being, which we have and are continuing to experience. This is not a hard parallel to make, or it is not a giant leap to show how this lesson still is relevant in our lives. Here, as we sit in dark times, in terms of our larger context, there are longer and larger periods of darkness as we approach the winter solstice. We now know that we have the shortest days of the year in our part of the hemisphere. In some parts of the hemisphere, it's dark all day, except for a few hours in the north. This phenomenon, also called the hibernal solstice, occurs when either of the Earth's poles reach the maximum tilt away from the sun. This happens twice yearly, once in each hemisphere. We know all too well that there are increased cases of depression, anxiety, and so much else associated with prolonged periods of darkness. It is so hard to think clearly when one is in crisis or in profound transition. And returning to our singular individual, the subject of our present concern, one can only imagine what Yaakov was thinking about his past, his family members, his struggles, his future, his very identity. Yet it is clear thinking that is needed to allow us to consider all of the complexities of such transitions and their impact on our lives. Perhaps faith in God and feeling God's presence in our lives, especially at critical moments, helps to provide us with this clarity and insight. Note that in chapter 28, verse 15, Hashem promises Yaakov, "V'hinei anochi imacha." Here I am with you. "Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech, I will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to the land. I will not leave you. Lo a'azvcha. Ad asher imasiti. Ad asher dibarti lach. I will not leave you until I have done and provided for you in the way I have indicated. Here we see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, and God's embracing of Yaakov and acknowledging the reality of Yaakov's precarious situation. Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg explains to us that the darkest and most dangerously vulnerable moment of Yaakov's 20-year excursion away from home, what she calls the darkness of exile, was not when he ran away from his brother Esau after stealing the birthright and blessing. It was not when his father-in-law Lavan tricked him into marrying Leah instead of Rachel. Rather, it was when Yaakov, alone in the darkness of the night, experienced this aloneness and this disassociation in this mysterious makom place. It was here that there was complete uncertainty and no guiding posts, and it was here that God had to be Yaakov's only guide and insurance of well-being. In other words, Yaakov was totally dependent on God and his faith in God. So we may wonder, why does God choose darkness as the backdrop for our story? Many would suggest that God wanted to prove to Yaakov, to all of us, that we are never truly alone. If Yaakov could learn to experience the divine in that place of darkness, all the more so in moments of light. Zornberg writes, there is a terror, a blocking quality to the night. Darkness looms suddenly, unexpectedly, barring Yaakov's passage. But this darkness is deliberately precipitated by God so as to speak to Yaakov in private. Having left all of his support systems behind him, Yaakov moves into the world of the night. Here, nothing is clear. All is a shifting phantasm, an illusion. And it is here, paradoxically, that Yaakov will find his ground of truth. While it is understandable for us to see darkness as debilitating and isolating, a space, a makom, where we are paralyzed by fear, Zornberg suggests that it is often in darkness that we truly encounter who we are and what we stand for. Consider these two dynamics, opposing reactions to the dark spaces of our lives. Sundowning. Any of us who have cared for elderly parents, people who have lost a sense of self, who are working with diminished capacity, know about sundowning. As explained by the Mayo Clinic, sundowning refers to a state of confusion occurring in the late afternoon and lasting into and through the night. Sundowning can cause different behaviors, such as confusion, anxiety, aggression, or ignoring directions. Sundowning can also lead to pacing or wandering. It can be particularly acute among those suffering from mental illness, psychiatric disorders, dementia, and other debilitating conditions. On the opposite side of the spectrum of darkness, in Jewish mysticism, there's a preference for the mystical quality of night and darkness. Chabad Rabbi Baruch Emanuel Erdstein explains as follows. Of the most profound and life-transforming of Kabbalistic customs is the tradition to be awake from midnight to dawn, engaged in prayer, meditation, and Torah study. Clearly a practice at least as far back as the days of King David, the sages, particularly those immersed in Jewish mysticism, have emphasized the importance of rising in the pre-dawn hours of the night, whether to rectify one's own unique soul or for the sake of the rectification of the creation at large. It is taught that this custom greatly amplifies one's access to the inner light of divine consciousness, as well as the ability to effect a sweetening of harsh spiritual forces and mystical healing on a cosmic level. In the case of sundowning, there is confusion as stimuli come to a halt, and there is not the noise of living around us, which may disturb, but also serves to center us. In the study and experience of Kabbalah, on the other hand, it is through cleansing ourselves of the business and white and cacophonous noise of living that we are best able to reach the heights of connection with God and God's truth. In thinking of all the activity in Yaakov's life, the movement from place to place, his multiple wives, the births of children, dealing with Lavan and so much else, the darkness here could be seen as frightening or cleansing, or perhaps both simultaneously. Rabbi Corey Halfon teaches about where we find God, and that is when we truly think that all hope is lost. In his teachings, I am reminded of a lovely writing called Footsteps, with which many of us are familiar, both in its Christian and its general iteration. I will share it in its general iteration. One night I dreamed a dream. As I was walking along the beach with my Lord, across this dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene, I noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one belonging to Ribbanu Shalom. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times during the path of my life, especially at the lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked God about it. God, you said once I decided to follow you, you would walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why. When I needed you the most, you would leave me. God whispered, my precious child, I love you, and I will never leave you. Never ever, during your trials and testings and tribulations. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was because I was carrying you. God is carrying Yaakov. God carries all of us. When we feel that it is the darkest, when we feel that we are alone, it is God that is embracing, hugging, supporting, keeping us, just as God promised to Yaakov in the text. Rabbi Halfon makes reference to the ancient rabbinic text, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, in which it is taught that it was in darkness that God met Yaakov there. And why is God called Makom, place? Because in every place where the righteous are, where the righteous stand, God is there with them. We make a Makom, and God is with us. For Zornberg, the sacredness of the place, the Makom of an encounter with God, is based on a person's ability to stand in the fullness of selfhood, of being vulnerable and recognizing what kind of support we need to bring light to our darkness. As an aside, just consider a few little Hebrew hints to this. Makom, place. Kum, kuf, cholam, mem, so feet. To get up, lakum, to stand. Come, I'm standing. Just as in Amud is the place where we read the Torah. Omed, to stand. Matzav, situation. Nitzavim, to stand at attention. All of these words are referring both to something static and there, as well as our intentionality in terms of being there with a sense of purpose. Zornberg tries to take us beyond and behind the words of the stories we read, to their foundational meanings, to imagine, as it were, that we were there, experiencing the uncertainty, the awe, and so many other emotions that must have encapsulated each individual underneath the verbiage we are left with. She even proposes that Yaakov was able to see beyond the artificial boundaries of what these words evoke and how we understand them. She explains as follows. Yaakov has the power to cut across the binary system that God has instituted as a model congenial to human thinking. To perceive the world in terms of structural polarities is convenient and in many cases productive. But the righteous men and women of special potency can shift the boundaries of conventional thinking. Yaakov opens for himself the treasury of the night, the power of God with him in the phantasmagoria of the dark. One of the many things I love about Zornberg, whom I've had the honor of learning with, is her looking beyond and underneath the words. While Yaakov is often reduced to simplistic terms, usually by male commentators, it just is that way, it is Zornberg, Nechama Leibowitz, Devorah Steinmetz, and so many others whom I'm honored to be in their circles, in their orbits, noting that all of these women get nuances. They're asking us to not accept what is on the surface, not to reduce everyone to what we see, as we do in the iceberg theory, but rather to do the work, to figure out, more importantly than what is being said, what is not being said, and what is so deafeningly loud in the silence. Another type of darkness, perhaps. We have already seen where God rhetorically asks where someone is. It happened with Adam and Chava, it happened with Abraham, and it will happen at other points. Here it does not happen. God knows where Yaakov is. And we can probably surmise that this recognition of presence and place goes both ways. God to Yaakov, Yaakov to God. It must be pointed out that too often people speak about Yaakov's lack of strength, physical acumen, not being a man of the field, being painted as a mama's boy. But here we see a different kind of strength that too many others do not have, and we ourselves probably do not often stop to recognize in others and in ourselves. When confronted by darkness, quiet, still, lack of stimuli, instead of becoming confused or disoriented as in sundowning, Yaakov moves and rises to the occasion, confirming his place in God's plan and God in his, as we see in Kabbalah. We learn in Masachet Brachot 26:9, that it is Yaakov who is credited with the Ma'ariv prayer. How fitting it is to associate this inner strength with that onset of darkness, of night, and our confirmation that as night comes, we are indeed here, we are centered, we are communicating with God, we know where God is, God knows where we are. God is here to protect all of us on our journeys, no matter how difficult or challenging. Let us all take comfort in that, and the fact that God finds all of us and each of our children and loved ones worthy of that protection. So too must we, as the protectors and advocates of those most dear to our hearts. May God continue to protect, love, and guide our children on their journeys and through the challenges that will no doubt be part of those wanderings, including and especially the dark spaces. For our children, for us, and for all we love, God is with us, no matter how dark it becomes during our journeys and the transitions that define those journeys. Shabbat Shalom.